Madrid, November. The cold pierced straight through the bones, and the first Christmas lights had just begun to flicker in the shop windows of the Spanish capital. In a luxurious Salamanca district, where designer coats and luxury cars mingle with the muted laughter of high society, the restaurant La Casa Imperial stood as a temple of refinement. And on that night, amidst glasses of vintage red wine and plates of foie gras, an extraordinary story was about to unfold. Seated at the center table, beneath the warm glow of an antique chandelier, was Rebeca Montalbán, one of the most powerful figures in the Spanish publishing world. Owner of a vast fortune and known for her guarded personality, Rebeca, at 39, was the embodiment of success. She wore a Carolina Herrera outfit and dined alone, as she always did. Her order: truffle filet mignon paired with a 600 € bottle of red wine. Meanwhile, outside, standing at the corner of the restaurant, was Sophia, a little girl no older than 9. She shivered beneath an oversized adult coat that reached down to her ankles. Her face was smudged with dirt. Her tangled hair clung to her cheeks, and her lips had turned purple from the cold. It had been 3 days since she'd eaten anything warm. She peered into the restaurant with wide, sorrowful eyes, as if the world behind that glass door didn't belong to her. But then, with trembling courage, she pushed open the heavy glass entrance. A waiter immediately stepped in her way. Hey, you can't come in here," he said, holding out his hand. But Rebeca had already seen her. Their eyes met, and something deep within Rebeca's soul stirred. Sophia stepped forward, her voice fragile. "Excuse me, ma'am, may I eat what you don't finish?" The words fell like a stone on the marble table. For a second, time froze. Conversation ceased. Cutlery stopped moving. Rebeca gently set down her fork, looked at the girl with a mix of surprise and tenderness, and gestured to the waiter. "Bring her a fresh plate, the same as mine, and a hot tea." "I'm sorry," the waiter blinked, stunned. "You heard me," Rebeca replied, calm and firm. Sophia stood still. "Come, sit with me," Rebeca said, pulling out the velvet chair beside her. The girl hesitated, then obeyed. Her thin body shook, but her eyes held a new spark. Within minutes, a porcelain plate sat before her, holding a meal she'd never dared to imagine. Every bite felt like a gentle stroke to her starving soul. As she ate, Rebeca asked, "What's your name?" "Sophia," she whispered. "How long have you been on the streets?" "Since they took my grandma away. She used to care for me, but she got sick. She passed away 2 months ago. Since then, I sleep wherever I can. Sometimes at the station, sometimes in the market boxes." Rebeca watched her, fighting back emotion. That little girl's face reflected a lost innocence, the kind of everyday injustice so easily ignored from the heights of power. "And no one helped you? Social services? Any adults?" "They said there were no spaces, that I had to wait." "But waiting makes you hungry," she answered with haunting maturity. An uncomfortable silence settled between them, broken only by the distant clink of a shattered wine glass. "And why did you come here?" Rebeca asked gently. "Because it smelled good, and because you looked kind." That last sentence struck Rebeca straight in the heart. No one had called her kind in years. People respected her, feared her, but no one really saw her. In that moment, Rebeca made a decision, not one backed by contracts or legal counsel, but by instinct. She decided to change the course of her own story. "Sophia, tonight you'll sleep somewhere warm, and tomorrow we'll speak to people who can help. But this time I'll be with you." The girl stared at her with wide, unbelieving eyes. "Really?" "Yes. But first, let's enjoy dessert. Do you like flan?" Sophia nodded eagerly. For the first time, she smiled a fragile, timid but real smile, the kind of smile that can spark an emotional revolution. And as the waiter brought over dessert, other diners looked on, some with silent scandal, others with admiration. Rebeca didn't care. The headlines of tomorrow didn't matter to her. For the first time in years, she felt she was doing something that truly mattered. "Do you have dreams, Sophia?" she asked as she sliced the flan in two. "I want to be a nurse, so I can take care of people who are alone. That's the most beautiful dream I've ever heard. The girl lowered her gaze. But I don't know if I can. You will, Rebecca assured her. Because now someone believes in you. The entire restaurant seemed to shift in tone. A place once ruled by extravagance had transformed into a space of quiet humanity. When they finished, Rebecca took Sophia's hand and walked out together. On the street, her chauffeur was waiting. "Let's go home," Rebecca said. Can I trust you?" Sophia asked. "Yes, little one. You can trust me." And as the car rolled away through Madrid's glowing avenues, a new story began. One where it didn't matter how much wealth you had, but how much of your heart you were willing to give. That night, Rebecca didn't sleep. In her penthouse with towering windows and walls adorned with modern art, the echoes of her conversation with Sophia reverberated in her chest. There was something about that girl, her fragility, her courage, her heartbreaking honesty, that had stirred places in Rebecca's heart she thought had been dead for years. Sophia slept in the guest room, wrapped in Egyptian cotton sheets. Before closing her eyes, Rebecca had prepared her a cup of warm milk, just like her own mother used to do when she was a little girl. It was a gesture she hadn't repeated since her parents died more than 2 decades ago. But that night, her heart wouldn't settle. She walked down the carpeted hallway, stared out at the city's glowing skyline, and knew her life had reached a point of no return. By 6 in the morning, Rebecca was already awake. She ordered Sophia's favorite breakfast, though she didn't yet know what that was, and went down to check on her. The girl was still asleep, clutching a pillow, her face wearing the calmest expression Rebecca had seen since she arrived. When Sophia opened her eyes and saw her, she sat up abruptly. "Did I oversleep? Am I in trouble?" "You're safe," Rebecca replied. "And today begins a brand new chapter for you." She took her to breakfast. Warm croissants, fresh juice, and thick hot chocolate. Sophia ate with a mix of joy and shyness. Rebecca didn't pressure her. She simply let her be. Later, she brought her to a clothing store. At first, Sophia resisted. "I don't want you to waste money on me," she said. But Rebecca gently insisted. "It's not a waste. It's an investment in your dignity." Hours later, Sophia walked out wearing new clothes, her hair neatly brushed, and a backpack holding the few belongings she had managed to clean. She looked different, but the most noticeable change was in her expression. For the first time, she walked with her head held high. That afternoon, Rebecca took her to a meeting with the director of a child protection agency. She presented evidence of institutional neglect, demanded an urgent report, and, pending resolution, offered to become Sophia's temporary guardian. "You can't just take in a child like this," said the state attorney. "I'm not taking her," Rebecca answered. "I'm protecting her until the system does what it's failed to do so far." Her tone wasn't aggressive, but it was firm enough to leave no room for debate. Within hours, Rebecca had been granted provisional custody of Sophia. Still in shock, the girl asked as they rode home, "Why are you doing all this for me?" "Because you did something for me first. You reminded me who I was before I forgot myself." The days that followed felt like a rebirth. Sophia began attending a nearby school, receiving psychological support and personalized attention. At first, it was hard for her to fit in. She had suffered so much that any show of affection felt confusing and disorienting. Rebecca, for her part, canceled trips, postponed book launches, and stopped attending galas. Her social circle was baffled. "What's going on with you, Rebe? Did you adopt a street girl on a whim?" one colleague asked mockingly. "No, I adopted her as an act of humanity. Something I encourage you to try," she replied calmly, without raising her voice. But not everything was easy. 2 weeks in, Sophia had a breakdown. She cried uncontrollably and locked herself in the bathroom. Rebecca knocked gently on the door. "I'm not good enough," the girl shouted from inside. "I don't deserve to be here. You're rich. I'm just trash." Rebecca's heart shattered. She spoke with the calmest voice she could find. "Sophia, please open the door. I promise you'll never be alone again." When she finally opened it, Rebecca held her tight. So tight it felt like she was afraid of losing her. And in that embrace, Sophia cried again, but this time, not out of fear, but out of relief. The next day, Rebeca did something she had never done before. She called a press conference. Standing before cameras and journalists, she declared, "Today, I want to speak not as a businesswoman, but as a citizen. A few nights ago, I met a little girl named Sophia who asked me for my leftovers. And I realized that if I did nothing, the same broken system would keep repeating itself. That's why I created the New Wings Foundation, to find, protect, and support homeless children throughout Spain." The internet exploded. Some accused her of using the story for publicity, but many others saw the truth, a genuine transformation. Watching her on television, Sophia whispered, "That's my mom, even if she doesn't know it yet." And while Rebeca spoke to millions, Sophia was quietly writing in her notebook, "One day, I'll ask her to adopt me for real, and then I'll have a home forever." Days turned into weeks, and what had started as a spontaneous act of compassion began to take the shape of something far deeper. Rebeca hadn't just opened the door of her home to Sophia, she had opened her heart. And for someone who had spent years building walls around her emotions, it felt like an emotional earthquake. Sophia, on the other hand, was beginning to awaken. She went to school nervously, but also with hope. Rebeca walked her there every morning, waiting at the gate with a warm smile and a hug. Small gestures that, for a child used to abandonment, meant everything. But the outside world wasn't always kind. Some of the kids at school started whispering behind her back, "Isn't that the homeless girl from the news? She's probably with that rich lady just for the money." One afternoon, when she came home, Sophia locked herself in her room. Rebeca found her sitting on the floor, school uniform wrinkled, silent tears streaming down her face. "I don't want to go back," she muttered. Rebeca knelt beside her. "What happened?" "They say I don't belong, that I'm just charity, that I'm not like them." Rebeca took a deep breath. Then she gently held Sophia's face in her hands. "Sophia, you are not in this house out of charity. You're here because you taught me more in one night than the world has in years. They don't know your story, but you do, and that's what matters." She hugged her in silence, the kind of hug that tries to piece together the broken parts of a child shattered by the system. That weekend, Rebeca decided it was time to return with Sophia to the place where everything had started, the restaurant where they had first met. But this time, they weren't strangers. Now, they were something much greater. They walked in hand. The maitre d' recognized them instantly, and instead of blocking their way, he gave a slight, respectful bow. "Welcome, ladies." Sophia chose the same table by the window. When the waiter arrived, Rebeca ordered her usual Iberian ham and hot chocolate. "Is that okay with you?" she asked. Sophia nodded, but this time, she didn't devour the food in desperation. She savored it. She enjoyed it. She shared it. While they ate, Rebeca pulled an envelope from her purse. "I want to show you something," she said, handing it over. Sophia opened the envelope curiously. Inside was a copy of the provisional adoption document, and at the bottom, a handwritten note. "Dear Sophia, I want you to know that if you want it, I want it too. Being a mother isn't about giving birth. It's about choosing. And I choose you. Today, tomorrow, always." Sophia's eyes welled with tears. "Really? You want to be my mom forever?" "More than anything in the world." And in the middle of the most luxurious restaurant in the Salamanca district, a homeless girl and a woman who had everything sealed a promise that would change both their lives forever. But fate still had one final test in store. That night, as they were walking back to the car, a familiar figure emerged from the shadows. It was Alberto Ramirez, the former social services officer who had ignored Sophia's cries for help, the very man who had left her on the streets. "Rebeca Solar," he said with a voice dripping in cynicism. "Didn't know you were into adopting lost causes now." Rebeca stepped forward, shielding Sophia with her body. "She's not a lost cause. She's my daughter. And if you ever come near her again, I will report you." Alberto smirked coldly and disappeared into crowd. Sophia trembled. "Is he going to take everything away from me again?" "No, my love. This time, I'm with you. And no one will ever hurt you again." That night, while Sophia slept deeply, Rebeca turned on her computer and began writing an open letter, a public denouncement, a call to reform the entire adoption system, to investigate foster homes, to protect children from the very people who were supposed to care for them. What had started as an emotional rescue was becoming a movement, and at dawn, while Madrid slowly awakened, Rebeca Sola was no longer just determined to change one life. She was ready to change many. Rebeca Solar's letter was published at 7 a.m. on her official profile. Within an hour, it had been shared over 100,000 times. It was a bold manifesto, with names, dates, direct accusations, and an urgent call for reform of the child protection system. She spoke not just as a businesswoman, but as a mother. This is my daughter. And she could have died on the streets while the state looked the other way. Social media exploded. Interview requests flooded in. National newspapers, TV shows, even politicians took notice. But Rebeca wasn't seeking fame. She was fighting for justice and for protection, not just for Sophia, but for the hundreds of children just like her. Meanwhile, Sophia was trying to adapt to her new life. Though she no longer slept in fear, she still carried invisible scars. She didn't fully trust adults. She flinched at certain sounds. She avoided talking about her past out loud. One afternoon, Rebecca received a call from the school. Ms. Solar, Sophia had a panic attack. She's in the nurse's office. She rushed over and found Sophia curled up in a corner, knees to her chest, breathing fast. "What happened, sweetheart?" A teacher yelled, and it reminded me of him, the man from the group home. Rebecca held her close, pouring every ounce of love into the embrace. "It's over now. You're safe. I'm here." That day, Rebecca made a quiet decision. She didn't just want to protect Sophia. She wanted to help rebuild her through love. They began therapy together. Sophia started painting, writing short stories, learning piano. Every small step forward was a triumph. Every laugh, a miracle. Meanwhile, Rebecca's letter reached Parliament. A special investigation was launched. 3 group homes were shut down. Several officials were suspended, including Alberto Ramirez. Justice had begun to move, but the past always finds a way to resurface. One night, after a live interview, Rebecca returned to find her car windows smashed. A note had been stabbed into the seat. "Stop digging up the past, or you'll end up like those kids, buried." The fear returned, but this time, Rebecca refused a break. "Who did this?" Sophia asked, seeing her mother tense. "Someone who wants to scare us, but they won't succeed, because we're stronger together." And together, they kept going. At school, Sophia gave her first public speech. "I'm not charity. I'm a survivor, and I deserve love, respect, and opportunity." The school principal, moved to tears, asked Rebecca to lead a new educational initiative, bringing empathy and protection workshops to schools across the country. And so the Seed Project was born, planting love where there had once been pain. As time passed, Sophia grew more confident. They returned to the neighborhood where she used to sleep under bridges. But this time, not in fear. They came with hot food, warm clothes, and words of hope for other children. One winter night, they found a blonde girl curled beside an ATM, crying silently. "Are you hungry?" Sophia asked gently, kneeling beside her. The girl nodded. "Come with us. I was there too, but someone saved me, and now I want to save you." Rebecca watched with tears in her eyes. Her daughter had closed the circle. That night, while the girl slept under a clean blanket and a warm roof, Rebecca and Sophia looked at each other. "Do you think we could adopt her too?" Sophia whispered. "I think you just opened another door," Rebecca replied with a soft smile. The story of Rebecca and Sophia was no longer just theirs. It had become a story of collective redemption, of wounds that become wings, of how a dinner, a shared plate, can spark a revolution of love. Winter ended with a spring that brought flowers, yes, but also hope. The blonde girl, who said her name was Alma, was just 9 years old. She didn't speak much, but her eyes said everything. Rebecca and Sophia welcomed her into their lives as if destiny had written their meeting long before it ever happened. The adoption process was faster this time. The same judge who had approved Sophia's custody was the one who signed Alma's. With tears in her eyes, she signed the final document and said, "The world needs more families like yours." With 2 daughters now, Rebeca reshaped her life from the ground up. She sold one of her companies and redirected her resources to the Semilla Foundation, which had already opened over 30 shelters across Spain. But they weren't stopping there. "We're expanding to Latin America," she announced at a press conference. "Because pain has no borders, but neither does compassion." Sophia, now 13, became the foundation's youth ambassador. She spoke at international forums, gave interviews, and above all, she listened. She listened to children who didn't yet know they were allowed to dream. Alma, on the other hand, began reclaiming her lost childhood. She laughed with innocence that filled every corner of their home with music. One evening, after a talk at the UN, Sophia and Rebeca walked together through the streets of New York. "Do you remember that first night at the restaurant?" Rebeca asked. "Every detail," Sophia replied. "What I don't remember is how I had the courage to speak to you. I was so afraid. And yet you did. And you changed my life. And now the lives of thousands more." Years passed. Sophia turned 18. Alma was 14. And Rebeca was stronger than ever. For the anniversary of the Semilla Foundation, they hosted a charity gala at the very restaurant where it had all begun, the Royal Palace. Cameras, press, high society, they were all there, but what stood out wasn't the luxury. It was the emotion. Sophia took the stage. 8 years ago, I asked for someone's leftovers. Instead, I received a mother, a home, a reason to live. This isn't about food. It's about being seen, valued, loved. Every child deserves to be looked at the way Rebeca looked at me that night. The crowd gave a standing ovation. Rebeca joined her on stage, took her hand, and smiled. "Today, we announce that we are donating 60% of our fortune to a permanent fund for homeless children in Europe, the Americas, and Africa, because there is no greater investment than the one made in a broken heart." The news spread across the globe, headlines, broadcasts, social media. But at home, what truly mattered was something else. The love that filled every corner of that house. One day, Alma came home from school with a notebook full of drawings. She had drawn her family, herself, Sophia, Rebeca, and another girl. "Who's this?" Rebeca asked. "A friend from school. She doesn't have a home anymore. Could we help her?" Rebeca smiled. Sophia did too. "Of course we can. That's how miracles begin, remember?" And so, the story that began with a simple question, "Can I eat your leftovers?" became a legacy of compassion, an endless chain of love that spanned generations, continents, and hearts. Because sometimes love doesn't start with grand gestures, but with shared meal, an offered chair, an outstretched hand. And when a hungry girl dares to look a millionaire in the eye, the entire world can change. Subscribe for more true stories that will remind you, no matter how lost we feel, love will always find a way back.